everyone, this is Peak Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be some quick thoughts and review of the 7th and penultimate episode of Ahsoka, which was titled Dreams and Madness. Now there will be spoilers throughout, so just beware when going into this overall episode. And just to recap quickly on the previous episode, where we finally saw the reveal of Admiral Thrawn, and learning how he wants to return from the exile, which was sent to him by Ezra if you follow the Rebels series. Thrawn releases Sabine Wren, and he sets both Shin and Balin after her. We then get the second big reveal of seeing Ezra, all grown up as he reunites with Sabine, and Thrawn, becoming aware of Ahsoka's pending return, sits to work with the Night Sisters to plan and track them down. Now overall, this episode I feel was very average, not terrible, but just not that installment that really carries any weight or excitement going into the overall season finale. We had plenty of spaceship pursuits and lightsaber duels and plenty of action, but it just doesn't feel like there's any real intensity in terms of the story, which doesn't really feel like it's moving anywhere. Still, at this stage, within the 7th episode, we're still asking the question as to what exactly is the point of this entire series. And the episode didn't really start that well, as we saw Hera going towards the committee of the Republic to answer for her crime of disobeying orders by venturing out to find Ahsoka. And we see her being called up by the Senator character, who many people are hinting has some sort of connection to Thrawn. That's why he was so eager to call out Hera for her disobedience. But then we saw the entrance of C-3PO coming in, speaking for Leia, who of course exists in this current timeline, as this show takes place shortly after Return of the Jedi. So obviously we assume that Leia has risen to some sort of major prominence throughout the Republic, and very much excusing the actions of Hera. Now some people ask why didn't they have Leia actually appear in this scene. Now narratively that would have made sense, but of course we're going back again to recreating the iconic character. Of course we all know Princess Leia, primarily played by Carrie Fisher, who of course would have been in that form at this stage of the Star Wars continuity. So it's not like you could have cast anybody older or anybody younger to play the role. And overall, I think it was probably well advised not to show her in any kind of CGI recreation. It just would have invited much criticism upon the show that it probably doesn't need at this particular stage. But to be honest, I'm not really interested in what happens to Hera at this stage. I just don't think her role is important. Now, I assume there'll be some sort of rallying of the troops in any eventual large-scale battle that we'll see in the finale, but she just hasn't been a character that really has had any impact throughout this series. Now, more pressing matters far more was concentrating on Thrawn putting his plans together for his overall return. We did have this moment where we see Ahsoka was able to connect or somehow sense Sabine, and this is how Thrawn was able to locate her, because the Night Sisters were somehow able to tune into the mental connection between Ahsoka and Sabine, and that's how Thrawn was able to discover the coordinates of where Ahsoka was headed. Now, I did wonder why Ahsoka didn't also sense Ezra, as he is the actual Jedi, right? So why wasn't she able to connect and sense his presence, and why weren't the Night Sisters also able to connect to tie into Ezra? I wasn't too sure about that. And just quickly, we'll talk about Morgan Elsbeth, who was really diminished as a character. She wasn't really that strong a character to begin with. Now, I did initially feel that they were going to build her up as to be the primary antagonist, and I felt that Bane was going to be much more of the sympathetic antagonist. But Elsbeth has just dwindled into complete irrelevance. She's just there now to take orders from Thrawn, and even when she challenges Thrawn, he quickly dismisses her overall objections and he just carries on with what he wants to do anyway. So a real waste of a character on that front. We then go on to seeing Sabine and Ezra taking on the assault from the desert troopers on the planet. And at this stage, I still cannot see what the fuss is all about Ezra. From day one or episode 1 of the show, they made it such a big deal that the whole primary narrative, the whole reason for what they were doing, their primary quest, was to search for Ezra. Now, there's nothing wrong with that if Ezra turns out to be a majorly significant character towards the final narrative. But so far at this stage, he just doesn't seem that integral or important or particularly special. Now, yes, of course, if you have watched Rebels, it would be a big deal in searching for this character. But you have to remember that many people going into this series haven't watched Rebels. So the show really hasn't done any kind of special effort to really build up the importance of Ezra as a character, or why indeed we're striving so hard to search for him. All Ezra wants to do is return home. He has no aspirations in order to see what evil threats are going on. He hasn't mentioned once Thrawn at all, wanting to see whether Thrawn is still alive or still posing as a major threat. No, all Ezra wants to do is go home. So just really nothing special particularly about his character. Now we had the moment where they fight together against the Red Desert Troopers, as I mentioned before. And what a missed opportunity it was to really give Ezra a stand-up moment where he could have wielded the lightsaber and taken all of these troopers down. But for some reason he refuses to take the lightsaber offered to him by Sabine, and he decides to fight with the Force. Now for me this just wasn't really impressive. We had all of these sequences where he was doing all of these circular movements, very much like what we saw with the Avatar movie, The Last Airbender. And it really didn't make sense because then Sabine chose to fight with her blasters rather than her lightsabers. So I just kept asking myself, why do we have two Jedi characters or two characters who have connections to the Force and they're not even choosing to wield the weapon of a Jedi? It just really didn't make any sense to me at all. Was it a case of the writers not wanting Ezra to outshine Sabine in any way by wielding a lightsaber? I'm really not too sure, but again, I just cannot see any special individual skills or presence or elements in Ezra at all. Even this scene didn't do anything to deter from that mindset. Now what caused even more confusion was the separation between Balin and Shin. Now very much we've understood that Balin was clearly the mentor or the trainer or the master for the apprentice of Shin, and that proved interesting in one sense of how we would see exactly Shin would develop under the tutelage of Balin. Now it was hinted in the previous episode that they had different mindsets or different ambitions. Shin wants to be part of something bigger than what the galaxy seemingly has to offer right now. And Balin wants to go on this separate quest, having lost faith in the Jedi and not really having any commitment to any type of order in the first place. So we see them going their separate ways, and I really don't understand why Balin wants to do, where he wants to go. I'm still hoping that there'll be some sort of double cross or ulterior motive separate from what's going on separately. We did have the scene later on where Thrawn, it seemed, was dropping hints or asking questions as to where exactly Balin was heading. So I'm hoping that Balin has been on some sort of separate mission planned by Thrawn, maybe some sort of contingency plan just in case things don't turn out the way that they used to. Maybe Balin wants to go against Thrawn in some capacity, but again, we've only got one episode left, so I really don't think that Balin could have too much more significance going on as we go towards the series finale. And again, this is much more of a disappointment given that that Ray Stevenson has really been the best performance alongside Balin, who has been the best character. So again, like with so many elements of the show, it really seems a waste if we don't really see him come forward in the series finale. And I suppose I could say the same for Shin, who again has interesting potential, but apart from giving pensive stares and being involved in lightsaber duels, there really hasn't been much depth towards their character. Yes, we see her take some sort of independent decision in this episode, but unless we're going to get a lot of focus into her character in the last episode, which I very much doubt, again, it just seems like an underutilization of a potentially good character. Now, what was far better was the rematch between Ahsoka and Balin. I liked the choreography during this sequence, but we were denied any final conclusive blow between the two, as it seemed that Ahsoka was only taking him on to distract him from the others as we see the ships coming on, and it seemingly blasted Balin away. We see him surviving, but again, whether he'll appear in the final episode, I'm not too sure. And despite being involved in this fight sequence, Ahsoka still very much feels like a periphery character. There was a segment of this episode where she was barely in the show, and again, I'm constantly questioned as to whether she was actually needed in this entire story. We have that moment where they seemingly have Shin cornered, and for some reason Ahsoka decides to let her go. After Shin turned down her offer to come and join them, she just rides away, again with no real hint as where she's going, what she's going to be, or what prominence she's going to have going forward. So it wouldn't surprise me if we don't see Shin again going towards the final episode. And we just end the episode with everybody reuniting again, with Thrawn hinting at his further plans. So again, at this stage, I'm just thinking, what else can this show do? We know that Thrawn wants to come back to the galaxy, but what's he going to do when he comes back to the galaxy? He's only in possession of one particular Star Destroyer. So we do know from the expanded universe that he goes on to become a bigger threat, but this version of Thrawn, correct me or not, is the Thrawn from the Rebel series, not Thrawn from the expanded universe novels. And not only that, because of the setting within this series, we know that whatever Thrawn decides to do, it's not going to last, because as is the case with all of these prequel Star Wars series, we all know that every single road will lead to the sequel trilogy. So it really takes away the stakes or the danger as to what exactly Thrawn is going to do. They've really been stalling ever since he appeared, and I will always maintain that Thrawn should have been introduced far more earlier, so we really could have cut deep into this character and really built up the sense of threat and danger as to what exactly he plans to do. Again, for me, that investment doesn't really appear to be there as we go on towards the final episode. And in terms of the final episode, I really can't see what they're going to do. I assume we're going to get some real big large-scale battle, probably involving the Star Destroyer and the Space Whales. But I assume everybody will come away from it pretty much unscathed, and we'll probably see the Rebels together in some continuity, as many have alluded to that this series has very much felt like a 5th season of Rebels rather than an Ahsoka individual story itself. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings on the 7th episode of Ahsoka. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you have any other movies or television series or topics that you'd like to see me cover within this channel, then also let me know, and I will see if I can cover that subject material for you later on down the line within the channel. Please also hit and like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you very, very soon.